Thank you for that very warm welcome, and thank you for the work you're doing across the country. This, there's some mitts there. This is the year. This is the year we're going to be able to select a nominee. We're going to make sure we can take back this country. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm sure you've noticed the president has been traveling across the country trying to get the people of America to support his new $500 billion stimulus bill. He keeps telling people, we can't wait. To which I say, yes, we can. You know, upon taking office, this administration's motto was, you never want to let a serious crisis go to waste. Since then, it's been clear they don't know how to end one. The unemployment rate has been over 8% for 33 months. Our country's been running a deficit for 36 months. And just last week, nearly 400,000 Americans filed for new jobless claims. We know that's not the best America can do. It's just the best this administration can do. And we're going to do a lot better. Over the last 33 months, President Obama has offered a number of plans for getting the economy going. The problem is that most of his proposals are based on one idea: more spending and borrowing. Today, government borrows 36 cents of every dollar it spends. And if we stay on that course, we'll face tomorrow what Greece and Italy and Spain are facing today. There is no nation big enough to bail us out. It took 43 presidents over 200 years to accumulate $6.3 trillion in debt. President Obama is on track to do that in just one term. His fundamental error is that he believes government creates jobs. He's wrong. He puts his faith in government. I put my faith in people. This is why I'm committed to making government simpler, smaller, and smarter. It's not only good for the economy, it's a moral imperative. We cannot, with moral conscience, borrow trillions of dollars that can only be repaid by our children. We cannot so weaken our economic foundation that we jeopardize our ability to preserve freedom. There's some who are going to argue that fiscal responsibility is heartless and immoral. No, what's heartless is to imperil our children. And what's immoral is to imperil the strength of the nation that was founded under God and preserved by His hand. This is a pivotal moment in the history of the country. We'll either be led by men and women who care only for the present, who promise more and more for less and less, or who ignore the tightening noose of debt. Or we'll be led by those who believe the deficits matter and who have the courage to act with fiscal responsibility. Now, when I became governor of Massachusetts, that was 2003, our state budget was out of control. My legislature was 85% Democrat. Some thought we could solve our problem by just raising taxes or borrowing more money. I said no. And even with about the most Democratic legislature in the nation, we didn't just slow down the growth of spending, we actually cut spending. And we turned a $3 billion budget shortfall into a $2 billion rainy day fund. I learned how to balance budgets in the business sector. You see, in the private sector, as you know, you have no choice about balancing budgets. You either balance your budget or you go broke. And you spend every dollar like it's your own, because it is. Now, someone should have told that to Solyndra. The federal government gave them a $535 million startup loan to build a factory in Fremont, California. The footprint of their facility covered 5 baseball fields. They had robots that whistled Disney songs. I'm not kidding. They had what was described as spa-like showers with liquid crystal displays that told you what the water temperature was. The company headquarters was called the Taj Mahal of office buildings. That's how government starts a business. Now let me compare Solyndra with Staples, a company that I helped get started in a small way. Our headquarters was located in the back of an empty food warehouse. We got used office furniture, old Naugahyde chairs. You actually had to be kind of an athlete to get out of them once you sat into them. Every penny we had went into selling and attracting customers. That's the difference between the private sector and government. Fiscal responsibility. Now I took that business experience and I brought it to the Olympics. I came there at a time when the games were in crisis. We had about a $370 million budget deficit. And some people said that the games were going to fail. The first thing we did was to change the culture of the organization. We started with some small but symbolic gestures. We stopped renting a big fancy conference room for our board meetings. And we decided to charge our board members rather, for their meals. $1 for a can of Coke, $1 for a slice of pizza. We cut the budget for things like decorations and brochures, travel, motivational speakers. We figured we had all the motivation we needed from the performance of the American athletes. We wanted the entire organization to know that every penny mattered. Now, I used common sense principles like that I relied on so many times in the private sector to come up with $98 million in immediate budget cuts. And when all was said and done, the Olympics that we helped put together were some of the most successful in Olympic history. And instead of a deficit of $370 million, we produced $100 million for an endowment fund. So in business, in the Olympics, and in Massachusetts, I learned how to eliminate deficits and how to produce results. And when I get to the White House, hopefully, no one will need to teach me how to balance budgets. I've been doing that for 35 years. Now's the time to level with the American people about what it'll take to cut spending and to balance our budget, to set honest goals and present a credible plan to achieve those goals. This is not going to be easy. It's going to require tough choices. Many believe it can't be done. I believe it has to be done. I believe in the American people. And when this nation calls, Americans deliver. Over the last 33 months, President Obama has grown federal spending to 24% of our total economy, 24% of the GDP. As president, I pledge to reduce spending to 20% of the GDP by the end of my first term. And then I'll cap it at that level. And further, I'll put us on a path to a balanced budget and a constitutional amendment that requires government to spend only what it earns. To reach that 20% goal, we're going to need to find, by 2016, about $500 billion a year in annual savings. Upon taking office, I'm going to immediately cut discretionary spending and submit a budget that returns spending levels to the pre-Obama level. Let me note, by the way, as I said at the Citadel a few weeks ago, I will reverse President Obama's massive defense cuts. Any savings that we defined in the core defense budget, we will redirect to rebuild our Navy and our Air Force, to add active duty soldiers and sailors, and to provide the care that our veterans so richly deserve. The world has not become a less dangerous place. We must preserve our commitment to a military that is so strong no nation would ever think of testing it. Now, my roadmap to a smaller, simpler government combines three separate approaches. First, eliminate and cut programs. And that'll start That'll start with the easiest cut of all. I will repeal Obamacare. I should have started with that line. Look, Obamacare is bad law, it's bad policy, and when I'm president, that bad news will be over. Now by the way, there are a lot of other federal programs that we should either dramatically scale back or cut out entirely. For each program that we have in the government, I'm going to look at them one by one. I'm going to ask this question: is this program so critical, so essential, that we should borrow money from China to pay for it? Now, for example, I like Amtrak, but I'm not willing to borrow $1.6 billion a year from China to pay for it. Look, I really like the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, but I will not borrow almost $1 billion a year from China to pay for them. And then there's foreign aid. Do you know that we give $27 million a year, guess to which country? To China. $27 million a year to China. I will stop sending money to any country that can take care of itself, and no foreign aid will go to countries that oppose American interests. And you know well that we spend $300 million a year on groups like Planned Parenthood that to provide abortions or abortion-related services. It's a long time past for that to be over. And so their first approach, we're going to eliminate or cut programs that are not absolutely essential, even when we like them. Second, we're going to return numerous federal programs to the states. And that's because innovation and cost management and reduction of fraud and abuse can far exceed at the state level what happens when Washington is in charge. Now, Medicaid is a prime example. We need to turn Medicaid back to the states to allow them at the state level to craft health care solutions that suit their own citizens best. And by limiting the growth of Medicaid funding to CPI or inflation plus 1%, we'll save $100 billion a year by 2016. Today, there are 9 separate federal agencies that run 47 different federal workforce training programs at a cost of $18 billion a year. Just imagine how much of that's being spent on overhead. I'm going to send those workforce training dollars back to the states, empower the states to retrain workers in ways that fit the needs of their respective economies, and in the process, we will save billions of dollars. Now, finally, in addition to cutting programs and eliminating programs and sending programs back to the states where they belong, there's a third approach to reining in federal spending. And it's to impose far greater standards of productivity and efficiency on government itself, just like it's done in business every other day. Let me give you an example. This was amazing to me, of just how out of control government can become when it doesn't have competition or people who understand how to exact efficiency and productivity. I was speaking with former Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman. He told me that during the Second World War, we commissioned about 1,000 ships a year. And the Navy Purchasing Department that year, which they called at the time the Bureau of Ships, had 1,000 employees. By the time John Lehman was Secretary of the Navy under Ronald Reagan, he said we commissioned about 17 ships a year, and Navy purchasing had grown to 4,000 people. Today, we'll commission 9 ships a year. And purchasing, it's grown to 24,000 people. A business like that would be out of business. We've got to cut the size of the federal workforce. On President Obama's watch, we have added 140,000 workers to the federal workforce. The American people are increasingly working to support the government. It ought to be the other way around. I'll reduce the federal payroll by at least 10%, saving $3.5 billion a year. And of course, we can save additional billions by cutting out extraneous federal contractors. But it's not just the size of the federal workforce and contractors, it's their cost. Since President Obama took office, the number of federal workers that make over $150,000 a year has more than doubled. I insist that we limit the salaries and benefits of public workers to those which exist in the private sector. Public servants shouldn't get a better deal than the taxpayers they work for. And by linking government pay with private sector pay, we will save as much as $47 billion a year. Now, there's still other ways to make the government more efficient and effective. We've got to attack the rampant fraud that exists in numerous government programs. One of the ways I'll do that is by enacting far stiffer penalties for those who steal from taxpayers. Cutting improper payments just in half could save as much as $60 billion a year. And we could save nearly $11 billion a year by repealing a political giveaway that protects unions from competition and drives up the cost of every government contract and project. It's time to repeal Davis-Bacon. One of the things, as an old business guy, I'm looking forward to is finding savings by combining certain government agencies and departments. For example, it makes very little sense. The trade policies and programs are administered by so many offices in so many departments. Today, trade matters are housed in the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the Department of Commerce, the International Trade Commission, the International Trade Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Treasury. And by the way, guess who gathers all our trade data? None of the above. It's the Census Bureau. Look, too many chefs not only spoil the broth, they make it inedible and prohibitively expensive. We've got to combine federal agencies. Let me just reiterate. I'm going to make the federal government simpler, smaller, and smarter by eliminating programs, by sending programs back to states, and by making the federal government itself more productive. And I'll at the same time provide for the national defense, enforce our laws, preserve our safety net, and honor all our promises to our elderly. This is the right course for a moral nation. Deficits do, in fact, matter. They matter if we want to convince entrepreneurs to start businesses. They matter if we want employers to start hiring. They matter if America is going to avoid the shoals of economic calamity. They matter if America is going to remain the shining city on a hill. And to those who say that deficits don't matter, to those who spend and borrow to win the praise of the short-sighted, we assert that you're in the wrong and we're in the right. My dad used to say that the pursuit of the difficult makes men strong. Our next president is going to face difficult challenges. Among these will be the future of Social Security and Medicare. In their current form, these programs will go bankrupt at some point. I know that, you know that, and even our friends of the opposition party know that. The difference is that I'll be honest about strengthening and preserving them, and they won't. President Obama has failed to articulate a single serious idea to save Social Security. I believe we can save Social Security with a few common sense reforms. First, let's underscore this. There'll be no change in Social Security for retirees or those near retirement. No change. Second, for the next generation of retirees, we should slowly raise the retirement age. And finally, for the next generation of retirees, we should slow the growth of benefits for those that have higher incomes. Now, while President Obama has been silent on Social Security, his agenda for Medicare has been a disaster. He's the only president in modern history who has cut Medicare for seniors. Don't forget, it was President Obama who cut $500 billion from Medicare, not to preserve it, not to sustain it, but to pay for his vaunted Obamacare. And he put the future of Medicare in the hands of 15 unelected bureaucrats. And those bureaucrats, by the way, they have the power to change Medicare, to put in place further cuts to it without congressional approval, even if those cuts overturn a law previously passed by Congress. President Obama's so-called Medicare reforms could lead to rationing of care or denial of care for seniors on Medicare. We must not let the public learn or forget who it was that cut Medicare. It was President Obama, not Republicans. Unlike President Obama, our next president is going to protect Medicare, improve the program, and keep it sustainable for generations to come. Now, there's several principles that will guide my efforts in that regard. First, just like with Social Security, Medicare should not change for anyone who's in the program or is about to be in it. We should honor the commitments we made to our seniors. And second, as with Social Security, tax hikes are not the solution. We couldn't tax our way out of our unfunded liabilities that are so large, even if we wanted to. Third, tomorrow's seniors should have the freedom to choose what their health coverage looks like. Younger Americans today, when they turn 65, should have a choice between traditional Medicare and other private health care plans that provide at least the same level of benefits. Competition will lower costs and increase the quality of health care. That's the answer for Medicare. The federal government, by the way, will help seniors pay for the option they choose with a level of support that ensures that all can obtain the coverage they need. Those with lower incomes will receive more generous assistance. Beneficiaries can choose to keep the savings from less expensive options, or they can choose to pay more for a costlier plan. And finally, as with Social Security, the eligibility age should slowly increase to keep pace with increases in longevity. Those ideas will give tomorrow's seniors the same kind of choices that most Americans have in health care today. The future of Medicare should be marked by competition, by choice, and by innovation, rather than by bureaucracy, stagnation, and bankruptcy. Our path for the future of Social Security and Medicare is honesty and security. Theirs is demagoguery and deception, and that's one more reason they'll lose. Now let's start over. The plan I propose to make government simpler, smaller, and smarter represents the biggest fundamental change to the federal government in modern history. It's a change we're going to have to make if the words full faith and credit of the United States are to mean anything at all. We're not the first people to come to this realization, and we won't be the first people to be criticized for believing that responsibility is a virtue. President Reagan shared our conviction. In his first inaugural address, he said this: "It's not my intention to do away with government. It's rather to make it work with us, not over us, stand by our side, not ride on our back. Government can and must provide opportunity, not smother it, foster productivity, not stifle it. The task before us is to reaffirm our conviction in the beliefs and values that unite us, in the challenges and opportunities that face us, and in the victory that surely awaits us. Thank you for all you do. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.